The Colts have a big week in Cincinnati with a joint practice on Tuesday and then the preseason finale on Thursday. I'll be there for it all, so what am I watching for? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's huge. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What is up, friends and family? This is Jake Arthur of HorseshoeHuddle.com, your boots on the ground credentialed media member, part of the beat there in Indy. And if you guys want to chat with Zach and I and get the inside scoop and become a Locked On Colts insider, then go ahead and follow the link in our show notes, because there's really no better way for us to tell you exactly what you want to, the info you're looking to hear, rather than asking us directly. And not everybody always gets to do that. So become an insider today. Speaking of today, we are about to kind of preview the end of the preseason. This week, the Colts have their final training camp practice. Technically, they wrapped up the Grand Park portion of it last week, but they have one more joint practice against the Bengals again on Tuesday, and then they wrap up the preseason on Thursday. I'll be there for it all. So today we're just going to kind of talk about some of the things I'm looking for offensively, defensively, guys who really need a big week. Maybe they're on the roster bubble and, either a bad week against Cincinnati or a really good week could turn things around for them. And then some guys who, again, are probably not going to make the roster, but they look like really good possibilities for the practice squad. So let's go ahead and we got some roster moves to discuss first. So Raekwon Davis is finally back for the Colts. He was brought back from the active non-football injury list. The Colts also signed center Mike Panushik and linebacker Mike Smith Jr. They waived injured Josh Sills, the interior offensive lineman, and then they put center Ryan Cole on IR. So obviously the biggest news with all that is Raekwon Davis finally being back. That's absolutely huge because in his absence, the backup nose tackle has been Taven Bryan. We've all seen that movie before when Grover Stewart was out for 6 games last year. Taven Bryan was part of a group that just got stampeded on week after week after week. Again, without Stewart, they allowed over 150 yards per game on the ground. So Raekwon Davis is not some sort of savior, but he's probably an upgrade, should be considered an upgrade. And it allows guys like Taven Bryan, Eric Johnson, Adetome Adebawore. It gives the Colts a little more flexibility to use those guys and put them in the right places to where their talents can be accentuated, and maximized. So Raekwon Davis being back, nothing bad about that whatsoever. And then the other guys, Josh Sills, him being waive injured. If he clears waivers, he will be added to the Colts injured reserve list. To me, that opens the door for a guy like Dalton Tucker to make the roster. He is a rookie undrafted free agent, interior offensive lineman. He's had a strong summer. It maybe also gives Danny Pinter a little more of a possibility to make the roster. We're pretty confident Tanner Bortolini is going to be on there regardless, but maybe it's not such a battle now between, Pinter or Bortolini. Potentially all three of those guys I just mentioned could make it. Seems like an outside opportunity, but we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's talk about what we're looking for from the Colts offense this week in Cincinnati. So the Bengals defense was not great last year. They were 31st overall in defense, 28th against the pass, and 26th against the run. That Colts game in Cincinnati last year, there's definitely things to take away from it because the Colts just were an absolute no-show. But I can't imagine it looking the same way that it did last time. The offense for the Colts should be totally different. Obviously, with Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, like everybody's healthy. And that was just such a weird game. Like every now and then, once or twice a year, you're going to get those games where you just don't show up at all. And that was one of them for the Colts. As for the Bengals, they've had kind of a roller coaster offseason, I think, in terms of their roster. They did add Geno Stone, who had a bunch of interceptions for the Ravens last year. And then they added Sheldon Rankins and Chris Jenkins Jr. to the interior of that line. Although they did lose DJ Reader, who's one of the better nose tackles in the league. I'm not sure if Rankins and Jenkins makes up for that totally. I think it probably damages even further a defensive line that already was very leaky against the run. So the Colts having Jonathan Taylor, obviously that helps immensely. So let's see, the Colts offense, you want to see how, Bernhard Raimann does against, the Trey Hendricksons of the world. Seeing how, Logan Wilson and they have another, of course, his name escapes me. But the Bengals have another really good interior linebacker there as well. Jermaine Pratt, that's it. So you kind of want to see what the Colts tight ends look like there, exploiting the middle of the field if they're able to do much. I've seen Logan Wilson make a lot of big plays in the passing game throughout his career, so we'll see how that goes. Really want to see how it goes with the Colts getting deep downfield and making those big plays, that we've seen from Alec Pierce, Anthony Gould, even Michael Pittman Jr. So very interested to see how all that unfolds. And then for the Colts defense, yikes, I don't feel great about it. They already had some struggles last week against the Cardinals, and it doesn't really get any easier here. You're obviously looking at a Bengals passing game that features Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Jermaine Burton, Mike Gesicki there at tight end. So they've got a pretty deep group. Their run game, make of it what you will. So out goes Joe Mixon to the Texans. In comes Zach Moss. Chase Brown was there as a rookie last year. Shouldn't be much of a mystery. He had a huge screen pass for a touchdown last year. I personally like the combo of Moss and Brown a little better than just having Joe Mixon. We obviously know what Zach Moss can do. Tough, determined runner between the tackles. Could do a little bit of everything. Pass protection, he can catch the ball adequately. Chase Brown's a home run hitter, though. Very good on the outside. So I like this kind of thunder and lightning combination that the Bengals have. That'll be a nice little test for, I think in particular, like Nick Cross and Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, the guys who are going to make up the box there for the Colts, the middle of the field. It depends what they do with Julian Blackmon and Nick Cross, really. Is Cross going to play deeper, or is he going to play more to the line? I think against an offense like this, it's probably a better idea to have Cross in the box with Julian Blackmon out deep, but we'll see. That's whatever the Colts want to do. The Bengals did add to an offensive line that has just really feels like it's been piecemeal and kind of an overall struggle for the last several years. They added Amarius Mims in the first round of the draft, and Trent Brown, who you never know if he's going to be around. He's been a guy who, has not always been on this planet when it comes to his time in the NFL, but has had some strong showings in his time with, the Patriots and the Raiders. But you really never know what you're going to get from Trent Brown. But yeah, pass blocking has been not great. Run blocking has been not great. The Jake Browning last year, being the quarterback for the Bengals when they faced the Colts, he already did plenty of damage. He looked like a Pro Bowler in that game, but now you have Joe Burrow to worry about. So yeah, we gonna pray. There's some concerns for the Colts defense this week. But they did step up in a big way in the second practice against the Cardinals last week. This will be a big barometer thing. It's not the end of the world. We're not making, wide sweeping generalizations about things just from preseason action. Again, the roster has to be cut almost in half, in the next couple weeks. But we'll see how this thing looks. I will say, if the Colts defense looks bad against the Bengals, that is probably to be a little more expected. But if they look great, I think you could probably take a little bit more away from that. So we'll see how it goes. Coming up next, we're going to talk about some guys who might be on the roster bubble who, could solidify their status one way or other with a pretty good or bad week. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or it's your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. But for your second listen, please enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Just get your daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategy so that you can win your trophy this year. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so let's talk bubble, guys. There's some battles here. There's some guys who make a really strong case, but maybe they're just a potential victim to a numbers game. I wound up with a lot more names here than I anticipated, so I'll kind of speed through some of them. So you got Evan Hull versus Tyler Goodson for presumably that RB3 passing down back role. I've kind of leaned Evan Hull most of the summer, but as of that last game against the Cardinals, that preseason game, Tyler Goodson just really offers something a little different. Like as a runner, Evan Hull is somewhat comparable to Trey Sermon. Both Hull and Goodson are good pass catchers, but if you truly want that change of pace back, then you're probably looking for more of a Tyler Goodson. Now, when it comes to like pass protection, Evan Hull is probably your guy. So I think this is a big week for both of them. It gives the Colts one final opportunity to make their decision. Maybe they keep 4 running backs. I doubt it, but, again, kind of a numbers thing. Having that many running backs when you have a bell cow like Jonathan Taylor is just, it's probably not likely. Next guy, DJ Montgomery. This guy is very Ashton Dulin-ish to me. He's someone who's done really everything right. He shows up on offense. He is a quality special teams player. He's capable of playing gunner. But Ashton Dulin, although he's not had a huge training camp and has missed a lot of time recently with a hamstring injury, I don't see the Colts moving on from him, and I don't think they should. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to carry 7 wide receivers either. So DJ Montgomery, I think, is a guy who is like a guaranteed lock for the practice squad. If the Colts, have to make that decision of Dulin and Montgomery, and they choose Dulin, obviously, maybe they can't even sneak him onto the practice squad. We'll see. But that's a guy who he's really done everything right. It's going to be a really tough cut for them. At tight end, this one is obviously of more consequence, Jelani Woods and Will Mallory. So do the Colts keep 5 tight ends? If they're keeping 6 receivers, which seems likely, then keeping 5 tight ends seems like a huge number between those 2 positions. I kind of tend to think they will because I just don't think the Colts are ready to move on from either of Jelani Woods versus Will Mallory. So Woods, obviously, the injury thing kept him out last year, but the biggest problem, I think, is he just hasn't been flashing the same this summer in the passing game as he was before. Pretty inconsistent. He's had some drops. Will Mallory just really struggles to stay healthy. So both of those guys have tons of potential and all the reason in the world for the Colts to want to keep them, but there's also reason for both to find themselves on the outside looking in. On the offensive line, Blake Freeland versus Matt Gonsalves. Freeland has had a rough summer. Like what you guys have seen in the preseason games is pretty much an accurate depiction of what has been going on in practice as well, just maybe not with as much frequency. Matt Gonsalves has had a pretty decent summer, but he's got the luxury of being a rookie and someone that they traded up for and by all means did not want to come out of the draft without him. So Gonzalez has got a pretty long leash. I think both of them make it. I don't really think the loser of this gets knocked off the roster, but this is a battle for swing tackle. If Freeland cannot be showing enough responsibility to handle that third tackle role, then it's going to go to Gonzalez. At the interior of the line, you got Dalton Tucker versus Danny Pinter and Tanner Bortolini. So the Colts have continued to move Pinter around a little bit, but we've seen it in real game action. Pinter is kind of a one-trick pony at center, but he's a decent center when he's in there, but you just don't really want to see him at guard. I just don't think he has enough power for it. Tanner Bortolini on the other end, very athletic like Pinter is, but probably a little better anchor. You still could maybe work with him a little bit to play center and interior O-line. I do think still that the long-term plan is for him to take over at center for Ryan Kelly whenever that is. Dalton Tucker, I mentioned at the top, has had a strong camp as well, and makes it so a guy like Josh Sills, who did have veteran experience, is, you can move on from that. I mean, he's injured anyways, but Dalton Tucker kind of makes him expendable a little bit. On the defensive line, Isaiah Land has had a really strong camp. You saw him with the sack on Saturday against the Cardinals. Multiple pressures, multiple tackles for loss. He's always been a really athletic pass rusher, but his run defense has really stepped up as well. He's going to be a super tough cut. I personally think I would try and keep him on the roster. They may have to wind up cutting him just because of numbers, but he's done everything that I can imagine they would have wanted him to do since they brought him in last year. Eric Johnson II. So he had a big opportunity with Raekwon Davis out this whole time to really grab a spot and say, hey, you should keep me on this roster as a key depth piece on the interior, and he just has not done it. He can disappear this week against the Bengals, or he could really step up and have a strong showing and make the decision a lot more difficult. Linebacker has some interesting ones as well. Linebacker, when I was working on my 53-man roster projection recently, linebacker was one of my toughest ones. So you've got Austin Ajake, who really has had a strong offseason, made some plays in OTAs, has made some plays this summer. I think his run defense has been pretty good, and he's just got good athleticism. Cameron McGrone's a guy who's been around for a couple of years now and is a kind of a staple in special teams. And Craig Young is someone who would be surprising if he made the roster. But it feels very Coltish. He's got length, athleticism, size, speed. He very well fits the Colts. And if they feel he's a strong special teams player, then I don't think it would be surprising in that instance. For fans, I think it would be, who the heck is that? But I wouldn't be shocked from my perspective to see Craig Young make the roster. In the secondary, you're looking at Chris Lamons versus Micah Abraham and Daryl Baker Jr. versus Jalen Simpson. These ones are really tough as well. On one hand, let's say you cut both Chris Lamons and Daryl Baker Jr., you're getting rid of two veterans with experience in the NFL in favor of two really green rookies. Abraham is undersized, and Simpson really is as well. He's very light and lacks power. It's not essential at cornerback, but I mean, he's going to get bullied around by guys. If he has to go in a game, he's going to get bullied around by like the A.J. Browns and the big, tough receivers of the world. So that one's really tough for me. I don't know if both the rookies make it, both the veterans make it, but Micah Abraham also has an essential skill that can't be taught, and that's that playmaking ability. And Jalen Simpson, if he's going up against, Daryl Baker Jr. and Amir Speed, it felt like the Colts, after they lost trust in Daryl Baker Jr. last year, it felt like they were trying to keep him off of the field until they absolutely needed him back. So that one's going to be tough. I don't know how they feel about him now. I personally think Baker has looked fine this summer, but we'll see what the Colts' temperature is on him. And the last one's Rodney Thomas. So the safety battle has obviously been a whole big thing this year. Julian Blackmon is a lock. You know what he is. Nick Cross, even if he doesn't win the starting role, is going to make the roster because the Colts feel he can play free safety, strong safety. And they say nickel, although we've really never seen it, but they feel he has position versatility. And I think he's the starting other safety other than Julian Blackmon. Can't really say free or strong because you don't know what they're going to do with him. But I think Cross makes it regardless. But you look at Rodney Thomas, who really only plays free safety. He doesn't really have positional versatility. And, I mean, it's not a name people talk about a lot, but Trevor Denbo is a key member of the special teams. You're probably not going to see him at safety, but he's very involved, again, in special teams. He's there. He might be the punt team personal protector this year, which is an important role. So he's maybe not going to play much safety for you, but he's becoming an essential part of your special teams, which can make a guy like Rodney Thomas the odd man out. So coming up next, these guys are probably not going to make the roster. They don't have as strong a chance as the guys we just talked about, but they could really put a stamp on it and get a spot on the practice squad, I'm thinking. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel lately, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I don't know if you guys have done the whole limbo of can I or can't I watch this game, but it's one of the most annoying things to deal with when you're a football fan. But you don't even have to worry about it with this, so hook it up with FanDuel. When it comes to hedging your Colts bets, they're currently 5.5-point favorites in this game against Cincinnati this Thursday night with a total point over-under of 35.5. So do with that what you will. You know, maybe you're more comfortable betting on a league that is actually in season. Well, in that instance, Caitlin, Aaliyah, and the Fever are on the road this Saturday to take on the Minnesota Lynx. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's talk about the man of the hour, Jason Bean. So I'm going to put Jason Bean and Keaton Slovis in the same kind of bucket here because I think Bean is someone who's a little more niche and specialized. Zach and I have talked about a lot recently about how he makes a ton of sense to be on the practice squad, especially acting as the scout team quarterback when you're facing, you know, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and those really mobile quarterbacks. But Keaton Slovis to me is more of like a direct replacement for a Sam Ehlinger type. I don't really know what the Colts are going to do totally on the roster, but I will give a sneak peek that I'm only going to have Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco on my 53-man roster projection. I think in the regular season, they'll only keep 2 quarterbacks. But I think there's a good argument for both Slovis and Bean being on the practice squad. It's not super common to have 2 quarterbacks. But Slovis is a guy who the Colts didn't bring in Sam Ehlinger. This coaching staff didn't. He's been with them for a year now, but Keaton Slovis is a guy they did invest in, and, they've seen him do some nice things. I mean, Sam Ehlinger is a fine preseason player, but I don't, when you project over time, there's probably not a whole lot that Slovis can't also do, that Sam does. So I'd be interested to see if both of those guys make it. I think at minimum one does. I don't see neither of them coming back, but I don't think either will make the roster. Running back Xavier Scott had a great game on Saturday against the Cardinals, but he's just kind of, again, it's a numbers thing. I don't think he's in direct competition with Evan Hull and Tyler Goodson, but he's a nice player that they're investing in and trying to develop. So I think we'll probably see him on the practice squad again throughout the year. Now, has he gotten to the point where if they have a bunch of injuries at running back, it's like week 11 or something, and they need to call someone up, might we see Xavier Scott? Perhaps. I could see that instance now. But last year, I wouldn't have said that a Xavier Scott could really get on the field during the regular season. But I think he's shown a lot more this summer, so that's definitely a positive in his direction. A couple of receivers. So look, Laquan Treadwell is very interesting because he's obviously a former first-round pick. He's a veteran. He had a lot of hype coming into the league. Has obviously bounced around the league a little bit now, but he's looked pretty good for the Colts. Like, he looks like a former high-end receiver who is facing low-end defensive backs. Led all the receivers last week, had a really good PFF grade as well. If the Colts could get him on the practice squad and he doesn't get picked up somewhere else, then I'd be all for it. I think he, among all the people who clearly aren't going to make the roster, the Colts would be in the most jeopardy of losing to a waiver claim somewhere else. I'm going to throw Derek Sluka into this as well. That is kind of a sneaky one, but I think if the Colts really like what he could do on special teams, he's made some big plays in camp. I could see him being a guy that they like more than we all know. He's got good size as well, and I think he's got good hands. From what I could tell, he's probably a pretty decent blocker. That's a sneaky one I would look out for. Again, it's just a practice squad move, so I mean it's inconsequential. But next guy up, Jordan Murray. Now, he is someone who has spent time on the practice squad, and he can make some plays now. Like in training camp, we've seen him make some decent chunk plays. He made one on Saturday against the Cardinals, and after he caught that, I took note. I was like, tight ends don't all move like that. This guy moves pretty good with the ball in his hand. So Murray is an intriguing guy that I would probably keep around if they can. And then you got a pair of defensive linemen, Titus Leo and Jonah Laulu. Now, they really like Laulu, but I just don't think there's going to be enough spots on the 53-man roster to have him on there. I think he's definitely someone they would love to keep around and continue to develop. And then Titus Leo, same thing. Missed last year with the knee injury, and I think has had a pretty strong camp as well, especially when you get him in those developmental periods with the other guys who just don't see very many snaps. I feel like him and Isaiah Land and Jannard Avery have just like really taken advantage of that. You could throw Avery into that as well, but he's kind of a seasoned veteran. If the Colts don't have room on the practice squad for him, I would understand that, but he's someone I would look out for as well. But yeah, that's it. Really big week coming up for the Colts. One more week for a lot of these guys to really make their final push to make the roster, to make an impression, to get on the practice squad, sign on somewhere else. These guys put out tape for all the 31 other teams as well. So let's keep an eye out there for it. Again, I'll be in Cincinnati reporting for you guys Tuesday for the practice and Thursday for the preseason game. We'll have a show for you every day this week. Obviously, we'll come to you live after the practice. Zach and I will come to you live after the preseason game as well. Expect to see plenty of Anthony Richardson and the starters in that one. So it's a worthwhile preseason game. It's not going to be very reminiscent of this last one on Saturday. Again, thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now, after this, go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can actually win your league this year. And remember, if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly, get the inside scoop, follow the link in our show notes. I already was busy this morning, responded to everybody's messages, giving you guys my true feelings of how I think certain things will go. So if you want to pick my brain, I am around the building all the time, so please feel free to sign up to become an insider. If you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. We're also on TikTok and Instagram. Also, please be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We love your ratings and reviews as well. That is very helpful to get more eyes and ears on us. And with that, you guys have a great night, and we will see you after the joint practice tomorrow.